A great temple stands silent under a darkening sky. The priests have stopped singing, the fires are low, not outside the walls, inside. One force has grown too strong, and now the old balance is breaking. Feared this moment more than war. Now let's go back to the beginning. Long before people wrote self-help rules or argued about the best way to live, ancient cultures quietly followed a principle that shaped their cities, their rituals, and the way they understood the human mind. It was not shouted like a command, and it was not carved as a law for everyone to see, because to them, imbalance was never only a personal problem. It was a crack in the structure of life, a weak point where disorder could enter. In ancient Egypt, this rule had a name that meant far more than truth: Ma'at. Egyptians believed the sunrise was not something to take for granted. It rose because harmony was maintained. And if harmony failed, even the sky could change. They imagined the universe like a scale, not a scale of gold, but a scale of the soul. Every action added weight. A lie made the scale heavier, cruelty made it heavier, greed made it heavier. And the goal was not to become perfect. The goal was to stay aligned, because the greatest danger, in their eyes, was not a single evil act. When one force became too powerful, it bent the whole person out of shape, and a bent person could bend a household, a city, even a kingdom. This is why balance was sacred. Not because it sounded beautiful, but because it held the world together. If we travel east, into the lands between rivers, we find the same warning wearing a different mask. They felt the world could change in a single season. So they watched human behavior with the same seriousness they watched the sky. Old stories praised leaders not only for strength, but for restraint. Because an extreme ruler produced extreme consequences. Too harsh, and people break. Too gentle, and enemies advance. Too proud, and disaster follows. Too fearful, and the kingdom weakens. Balance was not decoration. It was a shield. And they carried a quiet belief that still feels sharp. A human being is like a city. A city collapses when one part grows too powerful. When one group takes too much, when one voice becomes the only voice, when one desire becomes law. And this is why ancient builders loved symmetry and proportion, not only for beauty, but because it reminded them of something the mind forgets. When one desire dominates, everything else becomes fragile. Far across the ocean, the Maya carried the same idea into the way they understood time itself. Many people remember their calendars, but fewer notice what the calendars truly represented: birth and death. To them, balance was not a fixed state you achieve once and keep forever. Balance was movement, a constant return to rhythm. And here is what they feared: time itself could fall out of harmony. If duties were ignored, if leaders acted without restraint, if people forgot the rhythm of their world, the turning wheel could slip. This is where an ancient rule becomes clear in simple words. Balance is not only about how much, it is about when. A small anger at the wrong moment becomes a war. The Maya watched the sky because they believed the human mind also has seasons. And if you ignore the season inside you, you mistake your moment. In ancient India, the same wisdom turned inward, into the body and mind. These traditions often described balance through qualities a person could feel in daily life, not as technical theory, but as lived observation. A person could become too heated, restless, sharp, or too heavy, dull, slow. The goal was to return. To be neither too fast nor too slow, neither too sharp nor too soft, neither too attached nor too empty. And among the simplest rules they repeated was this: what you feed grows. Balance was the art of noticing what you were feeding and stopping before one force took over the whole inner house. Because humans are not guided only by logic. Humans are guided by repetition, by what they return to, by what they excuse, by what they allow to become normal. Ancient people watched this happen in families and communities. Favor one child too much, and the home divides. Praise one leader too much, and the people become blind. So balance was practiced like a gardener pruning a tree, not to harm it, but to stop it from collapsing under its own growth. And in ancient China, the warning became a symbol that many recognize, but few sit with deeply. It was a reminder that everything carries its other half, and when you chase one side too hard, The other side rises in secret. Too much strength becomes brittleness. Too much control becomes rebellion. Too much victory becomes carelessness. Too much comfort becomes decay. To them, balance was not compromise. It was the way nature survives. A river that moves too violently destroys its own banks. This leads to a quiet truth the ancients seem to understand in many forms. Imbalance punishes itself, not through revenge, but through consequence. Now step back and look at the pattern. Egypt feared excess because it tipped the cosmic scale. Mesopotamia feared excess because it weakened the kingdom. The Maya feared excess because it disrupted the rhythm of time. Different lands, different languages, the same warning repeating like an echo. Do not let one force rule the whole house. Because the ancients were never only describing the universe, they were describing the human mind. Too much certainty feels like safety. Too much pleasure feels like light. Certainty hardens into blindness. Pleasure hardens into dependence. Control hardens into isolation. Ambition hardens into emptiness. So they trained themselves to notice imbalance early, not when collapse arrives, but when the scale first begins to move. And imbalance begins quietly, when one part of you stops listening to the others, when hunger stops listening to wisdom, when anger stops listening to love, when fear stops listening to truth. Here is the final secret, the one the ancient world often left unspoken. Balance is not about staying in the middle forever. It is about returning. Returning after anger, returning after victory, returning after grief, returning after desire. Because life will pull you, you will lose balance. The mystery is not whether you fall. The mystery is how quickly you remember the way back. This is why so many ancient practices look repetitive. Daily rituals, seasonal cycles, periods of restraint followed by celebration. They were not rules for show. They were reminders, a rope thrown to a mind that drifts. And now we return to the moment we began with, the silent temple, the dim fires, the feeling that something essential is slipping. It asks you to hold two truths at once, to be strong and gentle, to desire and still restrain, to fear and still move forward. Because the moment you think you understand balance, you stop practicing it, and the scale begins to move again. So, the story ends the way the ancients often ended their deepest stories. Open, unfinished, and meant to follow you. If civilizations across the world guarded the same rule of balance, what did they see in the human mind that we still struggle to remember? Maybe the forgotten rule was never truly forgotten. Maybe it's still here, quietly shaping the rise and fall of relationships, leaders, and inner worlds. Because balance doesn't announce itself, it whispers. It asks only this: what have you allowed to become too powerful?